For more on the Labor election loss and its, well, leadership unity, it would seem now, around Anthony Albanese, I'm joined by Labor Senator from Queensland, Murray Watt. Senator, thanks very much for your time this afternoon. First on Anthony Albanese,
G'day, David.
Are you happy that he will be taking the leadership unopposed?
Yeah, look, I've been a supporter of Anthony's for some time, and I was very early to back him in the race this time round. I've believed ever since the result on the weekend that Anthony offers the best chance for Labor to connect with the broad range of voters that we need to connect with in order to win government. You know, I've campaigned personally with Albo, you know, in regional Queensland, in suburban Brisbane, in the inner city, and every single region that you take him into, he has quite a unique ability to connect with all sorts of voters. And I think that's a really critical task for us as we try to build the kind of coalition that we'll need to get into government next time.
I mean, just tease that out, because many point out that he's from the inner city or the inner western suburbs of Sydney. How does someone like that, who's got a craft beer named after him, appeal to the sort of votes you lost on the weekend, particularly in regional Queensland?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's face it, I think every politician would probably like a beer named after them, and Albo has that honour, along with Bob Hawke. And you know, Albo, I think the thing about Albo is that he's very straight with people. He's very clear about what his values are, and he reaches into the kind of core values that most Australians have. You know, most Australians, whether they live in the inner city or in Rockhampton, Townsville, Darwin, they do believe in fairness, and Albo projects all of his views around those kind of basic values that I think most Australians can relate to. So sure, he lives in the inner city, he represents an inner city electorate, he has always stood up for socially progressive issues, but when he's out in regional Queensland, it's not that he has to say something contradictory, but he does tap into what matters most to people in regional Queensland as well, and I think that's a really healthy thing.
One of his mantras, as you would know, throughout his political life has been that I fight Tories. He's quite proud of his warrior status, I guess, in taking on the other side. Today, though, he's talking about respecting our differences, quoting Aretha Franklin and so on. Is that really in line with the sort of fighting the Tories, Anthony Albanese, we've seen to date?
I don't see them as sort of different. I mean, I think that what you'll see from Albo as leader is that he will continue to take up the fight on, core Labor values, and he's already indicated that he's not particularly keen on ideas about, passing extremely high income tax cuts that are well into the future. So, you'll still see him take up the fight on those really core Labor values. But again, I do think that one of Albo's unique qualities is to bring together people from different backgrounds, from different parts of the country, and look for things that unite them. And, I think that there's a real appetite for that out there in the Australian community, again, no matter what part of the country you're talking about.
With the leadership sorted, who would you like to see become Deputy Leader?
Well, I should say at the outset that as a member of the left, I probably won't get a say in that. With Albo coming from the right, and it appears that he will be the only nominee for leader, that will be a decision for the right of our party. So it's not my decision.
Just on that, is it simple as that? Because the left's got the leadership now, you don't really get a say in who is deputy. It's entirely, well, it has to be someone from the right. That's pretty much how it will work. So I think all parts of the party recognise the benefits of power sharing and giving everyone a say. So I would expect that the leader will come from the right. There are already some good names out there. Obviously, as a Queenslander, I can see the benefits in having someone like Jim Chalmers in the deputy leadership role. I can understand the argument that someone like Claire O'Neill would be making to make sure that we continue to have strong female representation in our leadership, along with, people like Penny Wong and others on the Senate side. And then there's other names out there as well. So, it's a good field. We're not short of talent, and I'm sure that those who get to have a vote on the matter will make a good decision. I mean, just on that, how important is it to have a woman in the leadership? Does it matter to you if there is no woman as leader or deputy?
Well, obviously Labor's got a very proud track record in supporting women into Parliament and into leadership roles. We've got a very large number of women in our shadow cabinet in the last term, and I would expect that to continue. Regardless of what happens with the deputy leadership, Penny Wong will, almost certainly remain as the Senate leader. I don't see any indication to the contrary. And, you know, we will continue to have a number of very high-quality women in senior roles. I'd like to see Tanya continue to play a senior role on the front bench, and we'll have a number of others as well. So regardless of the sort of formal positions that they hold, I think you'll continue to see from Labor a much better distribution of power between men and women on our front bench and in the parliament as a whole.
On the policy front, the swing against Labor in Queensland was stark. Nearly 4%. You're down to 27.1% your primary vote in Queensland, so 1 in 4 roughly willing to vote Labor. What went wrong in your state?
Yeah, it's a devastating result here in Queensland, one of our worst primary votes we've ever received at a state or federal level, and it's going to spark a whole lot of re-examination on our part. I mean, I think that there are some factors that hurt us in Queensland that really hurt us pretty much around the country. You know, things like some of the tax changes that we were proposing clearly had an effect. We clearly didn't have the ability to sell some of those big dramatic policies. And one thing I suppose I've been cautioning some of my colleagues about is that while we undoubtedly have a particular issue in Queensland, we shouldn't ignore the fact that there were also swings against us in predominantly working class areas in other states, in the outer suburban areas of other cities,
and that's why I wonder, do you think franking credits and negative gearing were a problem in those working class seats and indeed regional Queensland? Places like Gladstone, Townsville, Emerald, I mean, are they big holders of franking credits and negatively geared properties, or was this about something else, something more to do with an overall position on jobs, climate change, coal mining?
Yeah. Look, I think I suppose what I was saying is that there are some factors that I think apply across the country, and I think that certainly the franking credits issue did cut through. You know, you would have heard from a number of other people. We were all getting bombarded with this mythical death tax that Labor was apparently going to be introducing. So I think that what a lot of people took from that was that Labor had a big radical tax agenda that was very complex, and people felt scared about it, whether they were going to be affected or not. But on top of those national factors, I think what happened in Queensland is that, you know, we had a big vote for Palmer and One Nation, who were effectively just harnessing votes off Labor and sending them straight to the LNP. That happened a lot more in Queensland than in other states. And then, of course, in regional Queensland, on top of all of that, you had the coal issue, which was just crippling for us in central Queensland.
So what do you do about that now?
There was a perfect storm, really.
You're absolutely right. What do you do about that?
Well, I think, I'm not going to sort of sit here today without talking to my colleagues and say this is the answer on Adani or on coal, but clearly the fact that this issue has dragged on unresolved for years and years and years continues to hurt Labor at a state and federal level. So I welcome the decision of Premier Palaszczuk yesterday to bring this to a head and try to get some sort of a decision made, whatever that decision may be. I think that's important for Labor politically, but I think it's actually really important for the state as well to have a resolution on this issue. But I think, you know, the reality is we do have a challenge in central Queensland. And when I say we, I don't just mean Labor, I mean central Queenslanders and Queensland as a whole. You know, the economy in that part of the world is largely built on carbon-intensive industries. Whether Matt Canavan and others want to pretend otherwise or not, the world is changing, and currently the LNP doesn't have any plan whatsoever for new jobs in new industries that will be available for people as well. You know, Labor has never had a policy of closing down all coal mines. You know, that's what you would have heard if you'd listened to the LNP and some media outlets. Even during the campaign, the state Labor government was announcing new coal mines in central Queensland, but that barely got a mention. So coal will continue to have a future.
Yeah, as part of addressing that,
coal will continue to have a future in central Queensland, but we've got to do more as well. Yeah.
To address that view, you know, even if it is an incorrect view or an over-exaggerated view, should Labor, as part of its policy review, look at this 45% emissions reduction target?
Well, look, I think obviously all policies that we took to the election have got to be on the table. I haven't heard anyone say yet that, you know, a particular policy must stay in place or must go. I think we've got to have a good examination of that. And I think that I just think overall one of the things that hurt Labor at this federal election was that there was so much big policy and big change coming down the line for people that, you know, in an uncertain world when people are struggling with cost of living and wages that aren't rising because of the LNP, that they were really fearful of that level of change. And I suppose if there's one thing that I can say that maybe helps explain Queensland and the Queensland psyche is that Queenslanders are a bit wary of change. And we were coming forward with a very big change agenda in one fell swoop, and it may have been that that was just a bit too much for one election, especially from opposition. I mean, the other thing, though, is that I've sort of been thinking about this over the last couple of days, and everyone's obviously very down in the dumps, but I think it is important that we don't engage in some ongoing exercise of self-flagellation. You know, if there's one thing that happens in Queensland in elections, it swings hard and it swings late. And that's what seemed to have happened this time round. So the swings are bigger in Queensland than what we've seen in other states. But, you know, I lost my state seat in 2012 with a massive swing against Labor, only to see 3 years later the Campbell-Newman government kicked out with a massive swing back the other way. So I don't think that this means that Labor is out of the hunt in Queensland forever. We've got to have a really good look at our policies. We've got a new leadership team in place. But if there's one thing that I know about Queensland Labor, it's that if we get thrashed, we get back up off the canvas pretty quickly and we get back out there fighting, and that's what we'll do.